Okay, we are live here. Welcome everybody. We'll just give everybody a few minutes to log in and get settled here. I've got Ricardo Ortiz from Fictiv and Shawn Chang from Dragon Innovation. We will dive into your questions on tariffs in just a few minutes here. All right, we'll give people just a minute or two more, and then I know we have a lot of questions that people are excited to ask. So I want to save as much time as possible to get you all your answers from our experts here. So. Okay, great. So let's get started. So welcome everybody to the live Q&A Talking Tariffs with Dragon Innovation and Fictiv. So I have Dragon Innovation's Shawn Chang and Fictiv's Ricardo Ortiz. Welcome, gentlemen. So why don't we start off and just give a brief introduction to the audience and let them know who you are. So we'll start with you, Ricardo.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm really happy to be here and happy to clarify some of the questions that the audience have posted. So yeah, my name is Ricardo Ortiz and I am the International Logistics Lead for Fictiv. I currently manage a team of logistics specialists here in the US and in China. And our job consists basically of making sure that products are delivered from one country to another and are all the way delivered to our customer's door.
Fantastic. And then Shawn, you want to give a quick little brief bio?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to be joining this webinar with everyone. So hello, everyone. My name is Shawn, and I am the VP of Strategy at Dragon Innovation. I am responsible for expanding our Asia-Pacific manufacturing network, thereby enabling many of our customers to build a lean and robust supply chain.
Fantastic. So again, welcome everybody. I am Andrew. I head up marketing here at Dragon Innovation. So I'll give you a quick overview of Dragon. So we are a manufacturing partner for companies who are building complex products. So whether you need help with MPI process, going through ongoing production, we can help you whether you're in the early idea phases, through the process with our content and our educational resources, and then all the way up through when you have a working prototype, some complete BOM and CAD, and you're looking to scale up and go from that one to many. So we're able to connect you with the appropriate manufacturing partner to help you get your product to your customers on time, on budget, and at the highest quality possible. So I'm going to pass it over to Ricardo to give a quick little overview on Fictiv, and then we'll get going.
Sure, great. Fictiv is democratizing the manufacturing process and transforming how hardware is designed, developed, and delivered physical products. Our virtual manufacturing platform pairs intelligent software with our global network of highly vetted manufacturers. We help hardware teams to work efficiently and bring products to market faster, from prototyping to final production.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ricardo. And since this is a Q&A, I always kind of like to start off with a couple questions for you all, the audience. So we've got a couple polls here. So I'm going to launch the first one. And this is just a question about what your role is at your company. So feel free to fill that out when you get a chance. And I always find these super interesting. Give people a few more seconds here, and we'll close it down. So we have, let's see. about 50% CEO and founders, and then another sprinkling in operations, engineering, and product owners. So very cool. I will share those results. And now we can hop into poll number 2. Let's see. Oop. Where did that go? Sorry about that, everybody. Let's see. Nope. Where is poll number 2? There it is. Sorry about that. Just a little drop down. And now we just want to know if you're actively working on something, or you have an idea, or you're just here for the educational material. Great. So we will end the poll in 1 second here. I'll share the results. So we got about 75% of everybody here is actively working on a product. So very exciting. So why don't we just hop right in here? I know I'm excited. We've had a lot of great questions come in, and so we're trying to get through as many as we can. So we're starting right on time. So if we have time to take some more questions, feel free to add those in the Q&A section or the chat. We'll try to answer those on the fly, but kind of just to set the stage, majority of the questions that came in for this Q&A session were in regards to the China-US relations. However, we have some other like more general knowledge questions about tariffs, supply chains, and manufacturing, so we'll weave those in as well. And so there was some overlap with a lot of these questions as well, so we try to combine some of them so that you get a good general understanding of what's going on, and you can learn from your peers and other manufacturers, and hopefully you can be doing better with this process. So I'm going to hop right in. We'll start with you, Shawn. What are the tariff differences per country, and can we change the origin of a product to avoid tariffs?
Yeah, so I think for US side, tariffs for most countries actually fall under column 1 of the general section in the HS under the HS code or so. Unless they're so-called sanction countries, which they might fall under column 1 of the special section. And section 301 is really a whole different story of this. It has its own rules, etc. Coming back to the second part of the question is changing the origin of the product to avoid tariffs. Really the rules of the origin for a non-wholly obtained product, and that which really means if you have a product that has multiple components, multiple inputs from different countries, or et cetera, that's considered a non-wholly obtained product, versus a wholly obtained product would be something like if it's a rare earth that's mined somewhere and it's from that country, then the country of origin is much easier to determine. So for most products, or for many products, especially consumer electronics or so, they are considered non-wholly obtained product. And when that comes in, it's usually dependent on so-called the substantial transformation principle. And what that really means is that substantial transformation or value add must take place in that country for the product to be considered made in that country. The percentage of the value add can differ between countries, and in many Asian countries, it's somewhere between 30 and 35%. What do you think, Ricardo? Is that something that's what are your thoughts on this?
That is totally true. In order for a product to take on the country of origin, we first have to understand what these rules of origin are. And depending on the type of product that you are handling or producing, I can assume that since a lot of us here are, or a lot of you there are founders, the diversity of your products are really different. So it really depends on what type of product you're manufacturing or sourcing. But understanding the rules of origin it's a crucial point before you actually want to understand or could understand what will be the impact of moving to a different place.
Fantastic. And I think that segues pretty great into the next question that's for you, Ricardo. Probably you could expand even a little bit more about what you were just talking about. So what are the strategies to minimize by finishing work here in the US, and which countries to target for manufacturing to minimize tariffs?
Yeah, so we this is kind of like an expansion of the previous question that John already elaborated. So yeah, just first of all, understand your rules of origin, and then also understand that if you're planning on moving production or if you're planning on finishing work in another country, will that be changing the understanding of, will that be changing the country of origin? To take a product and just finishing it out in another country doesn't necessarily mean that you are changing the country of origin of that product. So in general, and this is an area that is quite broad in the regs. In general, if you want to change the country of origin, that product has to go through a substantial transformation. Substantial transformation could be not only on the shape, it also has to take other criteria as the use. You cannot finish or finish a jacket and then just incorporate the buttons in another nation and call it from that nation. So if I have to make a point clear in these questions, in these two questions, will be that a product has to be going through a substantial transformation in another nation in order to change that country of origin.
Fantastic. And Shawn, I got one for you next. So what tariff mitigation strategies have proven most successful for startups or other companies that you've seen so far?
Well, that's a very good question. And we get a lot of questions just like that with our customers. I personally think there are a number of supply chain strategies that any size company, startups or incumbents should consider, especially in this very dynamic environment that we are in right now. So those strategies can include anything from moving the manufacturing, diversifying your supplier base, optimizing your supply chain, redefining your pricing strategy, fine-tuning your trade management practices, or even exploring filing a request for exemption if you are being affected by the Section 301. So there are, I think that's on a very high level strategies that I think any companies, that applies to anyone who has, especially offshore and outsource their manufacturing, really should be thinking of on a very high level.
Fantastic. Ricardo, if you want to expand, feel free, but otherwise I've got the next question queued up for you.
Yeah, let's move to the next question. I'm sure I'm going to elaborate more in the next coming.
For sure. And I think, we're aiming to start a little bit broad here, and then we'll go even more in depth for some of these really meaty questions that'll give you guys a good chance to kind of dive right in for some specific type examples. So Ricardo, if we're manufacturing in Korea, how could it affect us?
Yeah, so I believe this question comes from a more general question previous to this of, if we're manufacturing in Korea, how are we affected by the Section 301s imposed? So currently, this Section 301 sanctions are only on Chinese products. Korea is not being affected by these sanctions currently, and I don't think it will be. Let's see how this moves in the future days. But as of now, Korea is not being affected. Now, if you're manufacturing in Korea, depending on what you're manufacturing in Korea, you may have components from other countries. Let's say you're manufacturing hardware or an electronic in Korea and you use Chinese components. Depending on the level of components from Chinese products or the level of Chinese products integrated in your material or in your product, you will have to go back to the rules of origin. rules of origin will define the amount, like what country is designated to be the country of origin. You will not, you cannot, it will be really difficult to call a product made in Korea if 90% of the components in that product are made in China, for example. And so this is the only, the way that I can see that this Section 301 could affect you. If by any chance your hardware or your product incorporates products for other nations.
Fantastic. Shawn, I've got one for you. So what strategies do you recommend for reducing the impact of fluctuations? Are you recommending that your clients follow the recent moves of tech titans to shift production from China to other Asian countries? As a company, what are you doing to reduce your concentration in China, thus giving customers more options?
This sounds like it's more like 3 questions.
Yeah, we'll combine.
I will just go ahead. I'll tackle it one by one. I think the first question was, what strategies do I recommend for reducing the impact of fluctuations? And I would have to guess the fluctuation from tariffs is, or maybe raw materials. But to answer that question first, the global manufacturing landscape is dynamic, very dynamic, and more so today than ever. And it is very important to keep up with the changes. I always advise my customers to look for opportunities for continuous improvement in their supply chains. I think the second question is, are we recommending my customers to follow recent moves of tech titans to shift production from China to other Asian countries? So as for shifting production goes, that decision should be on a case-by-case basis, as every business is really unique. I know customers that like to quote what Apple is doing and think they can follow the same path, only to quickly find out that the playing field is not level. So when you're thinking of moving or making changes to your supply chain and making these decisions on it, one really needs to do a complete analysis of that country, and that involves the economics, the infrastructure, the politics of that country, the political stability, etc., the resources that you have to manage, to move everything and to go to that country, that new place, and also the competency of the workers or so, the workforce in that country. And because every country is really different, when you do, so I would say people really need to think about the trade-offs of going through these decisions. I think the last question was, as Dragon, as a company, what are we doing to reduce concentration in China, thus giving our customers more options? And to answer that, as for Dragon, we have expanded our manufacturing network to across Asia Pacific, and that's where I personally oversee, to beyond to North America and also Europe, where we have teams over in those continents as well that are helping our customers navigate through this changes in supply chain and how it fits to their overall strategy.
Yeah, didn't you spend about 100 days abroad there kind of checking out? I feel like, yeah, you have a detailed journal of that process.
I did, yes. And feel free, I've tried to make some of that available on our blog, where I've really traveled all across Asia Pacific, been to Taiwan, I was in Indonesia, I was in Singapore, Malaysia, I was in Japan, etc. And over 100 days, and really understanding where components are moving, how supply chains are vertically integrated or not integrated. For example, what I've seen in Vietnam was very interesting, but also where opportunities are going and what are competencies and really the next so-called comparable things for options for our customers when they're thinking of having a dual source strategy.
Fantastic. Yeah, Ricardo, feel free to expand on that, or I got a pretty meaty question for you next.
Yeah, feel free to shoot the next one. I'm looking at it. It looks like I have more than four questions in here.
Yeah,
I'll
It's
take
all
my.
based around the same topic. So this is a very specific question. So I'll read it, and then we can break it down one by one as well. So I'm unsure of how to make sure I have the full picture of tariffs impact on our COGS, our cost of goods sold. We have tariffs applied to the cost of many of our PCBA components, and I believe we have an additional tariff applied to our assembled circuit board when shipped to us from China. We'd initially planned to have our full units assembled, PCBA assembled into plastic enclosure in China at the same CM who will do our injection molding, but believe we will now be subject to additional tariff on the assembled unit when it's imported from China as well. How are other companies who have not yet begun manufacturing ensuring that they have the full picture of tariffs impact on their CM sourcing decisions? If China no longer makes sense due to tariffs, where are other companies moving their electronic manufacturing? Our understanding is that we can use the other code for our injection molding plastic enclosure, so are not subject to tariff if we import just the plastic enclosures.
Yeah, I get to elaborate in this question from
Yeah.
Shawn's previous question. That's why I didn't want to spend some time in the other one. So first of all, there are many questions here, very specific on area, but I will try to do it not only specific, but also general for the diverse audience here.
Mm-hmm.
My first point for you, if you are a smaller manufacturer, a big manufacturer, it's very important for you to know the landing cost, right? And so how do you know this landing cost if you are sourcing products from overseas? Well, in addition of the production costs and all the fixed costs that you already know because somebody's telling you, all of a sudden you face this scenario where new tariffs are imposed, but you don't know if they will affect you and how much are they going to affect you. Just to give a brief introduction of this, when we hear that tariffs are imposed into certain products, that level or that percentage of tariff or increments in the amount of duty that you have to pay are based on the HTS code. So the first step for you to know your landing cost will be to classify your goods and understand what is your HTS code. Because the HTS code is the set of numbers that will be giving you the exact duty that you will be paying on those goods. So know your HTS. If you don't know your HTS, don't freak out. There are people who specialize on all these customs broker businesses. So reach out to a custom broker, a customs specialist, and obtain your HTS. It is not expected that all of the manufacturers understand what this HTS is. Your main function is to create a piece or create a product, but you know what that product is. So if you share what that product is, the functionality of your product with your custom broker, they will be giving you the HTS. So know your HTS and you will know the tariff. Now, Shawn said that he mentioned in the first question where to find the tariff, and this is in the harmonized tariff of the United States. Column one will involve the majority of the countries, and we have the special part. But in addition to these, we hear the Section 301s, which are tariff imposed into the Chinese products. So my recommendation for you is that once you identify your HTS and you identify the amount of duty that you are paying based on the set percentage in the tariff, then you look into the 4 different lists of Section 301 to understand what is the increment that you will be given into bringing those products. There's another question hidden in here that says that if I change the classification to other, my assumption is that they're referring on the classification when we look at the tariff into other articles not elsewhere specified, which will be the description. I do not recommend to just fall into other classification if you're not sure, just so that you avoid payment of tariff. My strong recommendation is that you will always have to put your product with the real HTS classification and don't try to get into the other provisions. Where other companies, in the questions to where are other companies moving, that will be Shawn, who is a more professional person to respond to these. But I know that many companies are moving to Southeast Asia. More specific can be shared by Shawn. But you should never misclassify your products, understand the amount of duty that will be imposed to you. And if you decide to move to any other countries from Southeast Asia, you may want to give a call to Shawn. But always understand that no matter where you move, these countries have goods and bads. So if you are moving your production just because now the products from China are having a high duty rate, understand that you may be moving to your production to countries with political problems, with social problems. So always there's a risk into where you move your production, and you do not base your decision only on the duty tariff.
No, Ricardo, those are really valid and great points that you made there. I just wanted to, just on that last question, where do you move? Again, Ricardo has accurately captured that there are trade-offs when you start thinking about other countries for manufacture. And you really, in order to make a well-informed decision, one really have to look at what products you're trying to build, and then look at the options, do a full analysis of so-called the options, the feasible options or so, and then come back. Once you have all that information, come back and understand the trade-offs based on those options. One of the things is to understand that many customers of ours, they love to look at one variable, which is so-called the labor wages, labor weight, and then they'll say, you know what, then we should really investigate that. That's not entirely true. Depending on what you're building, the complexities and stuff, and also understanding this global supply chain, whether or not that supply chain really is vertically integrated there. Many times, if the supply chain is not vertically integrated there, you could end up getting cheaper labor wages, but at the expense of shipping components in, because it's so overly reliant on imports of raw materials or components. And that changes the whole equation significantly. So there are certain products that I would, depending on the complexity, and we do a tear down, we understand exactly what industries, what risks are, whether from IPs to all the way to the tolerances of the products and where the use cases are. There are certain countries that we will highly recommend. Other countries would say, you know what, probably the risks are not worth it, and you should really reconsider. So that's probably, I think, for that question, where I would add in.
Fantastic. So I got one for you, Shawn, and then Ricardo, feel free to jump in as well. So this is a pretty specific one as well. So I have heard many conflicting details. For instance, I have heard that if we import from outside of the country direct to customers, then we can avoid the tariff if we stay under $800 US. The conflicting part was whether that $800 US was BOM costs or receiver invoice amount.
Right. I think this is more of Ricardo would definitely be an expert on this, but I'm going to say something just because I've had similar instances in the past of helping my customers as well doing the same thing. So I believe for this question, I believe this gentleman or this person who's asking the question is referring to the Section 321 of the Tariffs Act of 1930, which essentially states that if the import value of the shipment qualifies for the de minimis thresholds under Section 321, then Section 301 duties do not apply. one should know that the Section 321 applies to shipments imported by one person on one day. And for merchandise, the merchandise shall be covered by a single order, meaning you can't split that into multiple shipments to secure so-called the de minimis treatment. So as an importer, or so, you need to be fully aware of all your inbound shipments to ensure that they're compliant with the Section 321s, and also to ensure that they're correctly valued. So I'll let Ricardo, what is your expertise and your thoughts on this?
Yes, you are correct. This question is referring to the type of entry. So we have different type of entries, and one of them will be the Section 321 for cargo that do not exceed $800 in value. Merchandise imported with that $800 or less value is exempt for the payment of duties, but you are correct when you say that it has to be the whole shipment. You do not need to, or do not try to avoid the payment of duties by breaking your single order into 10 orders to maintain a value lower than the 800. That would be an incorrect way to do it, and you could get caught. So yeah, you're right. It is possible. And just to cover the second portion of the question, will that be based on the bill of materials, or would that be based on the cost of the invoice? That will be based on the transaction. The preferred method to do it is through transaction value method, which will be telling you to, it's not only the cost of production, it includes other costs. What costs you to ship that good under the FOB value? That will be your indicator, or more general indicator. Valuation in general is based on an FOB value, so not the bill of materials.
Fantastic. That was very helpful. So Ricardo, I got a couple for you. They're one of these multi-dual type questions here. So should we be paying tariffs on prototypes we order? And will our clients need to pay tariffs if they get production from China? And if so, how do we know what rates they should be paying?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So in general, when we bring prototypes to the US, they are free of duty. And why? Because the reason through this is because we will not be making any profit through those prototypes. So there are some requirements into what is considered to be a prototype, of course. And those requirements are, if you are importing your goods for the pre-production, production, or post-production of products, and it has to be in these stages, but the prototypes will be used exclusively for development, testing, or product evaluation. That means none of these categories involve making a profit in the US out of this cargo. And the last portion of this, once you establish that the products will be used in one of these categories and for this use, a really important one is to mention that the quantities of products importing under the prototype category should be subject to non-commercial quantities. And this means that maybe if you are bringing 5 pieces of this specific product, will be a considerable amount of quantity under the prototype provision, but that same part under 5,000 quantity, it will be, you will have a hard time showing to customs that you really need 5,000 of these parts for the evaluation or quality control portion. So keep in mind this, we don't want to use a different HTS classification or category for your products. And keep in mind as well that for the duration of your products in the US, customs can come back to you and say, please give me proof on a greeting statement. You need to show me proof of this prototype provision. So you're obligated to give this statement to customs at some point.
So Ricardo, just to build off that question, if the sample is over $800, that's still okay, right? And if the sample just happens to be from China,
Yeah,
that is okay, right?
if the sample comes under $800, it will have an HTS code. That HTS code will give you a duty percentage of 0, and that's how you will enter it. So it doesn't matter the value for these cases, because regardless of the value of that prototype, that HTS is subject to be free of duty.
Fantastic. So I think actually the second part of this question segues pretty good into this next question for you, Shawn. So what are the big consumer electronics companies doing, or what are the big electronics companies with established manufacturing bases in China doing about the tariffs? And are they able to be creative with the categorization of their products, or are they just eating the costs in the short term and looking at other options?
Okay, I think this also, we've covered a little bit in a previous question about the supply chain designing and mitigating impacts from tariffs, et cetera. So actually many hardware companies are actually making adjustments to their global supply chains, really for various reasons, whether to stay competitive, to mitigate risks, or just simple good business practices to continuously improve. So that is, and that's what we're seeing, I think, regardless of tariffs or so, supply chains change all the time as well. The second part of the question is, are these companies able to be creative with categorizing their products, or are they just eating the cost in the short term and looking into other options? So I don't know, when we think about being creative about categorize their products, I think Ricardo and I, we started getting real sweaty now, creative here. But my understanding is, as for recategorizing products for HS code purposes, and feel free to jump in and let, share your thoughts as well, Ricardo, okay? That the importer will need to file a prior disclosure with the Customs and Border Protection if they want to reclassify their HS code. Now, if you do file a prior disclosure, you will need to backtrack on all your previous entries with the incorrect HS code and pay the corresponding duties and fees. Meaning, if you've imported in the past and you've used one HS code, right now, at this instance, you say, now I want to change the HS code. My understanding is that you will need to, the prior disclosure will ask you to go ahead and from day one when you started importing this thing, what was to change that HS code to whatever you're trying to change right now. And you're going to have to pay the corresponding fees and duties on those imports. So do know that importers, they can also apply for a tariff exemption through the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, for items in list 3. And I think that it's until September 30th, which is until this month, where you could apply for a tariff exemption. And for list 4 is, I believe, is still awaiting announcement. So those are what I've seen for some companies that are trying to mitigate the so-called Section 301 tariffs, if it applies to them as well. But feel free to share your thoughts, Ricardo.
Yeah, I'm going to add a note over there because I think this is something that if you are the head of a startup and you start being creative, that will be you need to hear this. So there's no such a thing as be creative with your HTS code or your category. Your product is your product and is for the use that you already have defined. Now, when you're classifying your goods, those goods are classified under certain categories in the tariff for certain uses in the tariff. And you should know that when you are an importer of cargo, you have this number that is called your importer record number. And this importer record number in their custom system shows all of your transactions that have gone through your account. Just like when you have your bank account and you see all your statement. Customs can see all the different transactions that you have done. And they see that under this importer record number, you already had 1,000 or 10,000 transactions under this specific HTS code. All of a sudden, in custom systems, it's detected that after the president established a new tariff into this specific HTS code, all of a sudden you decided to change the HTS code. You decided to be creative and change the use and change the HTS code. Customs will catch you because they will detect that there is a change in the order of transactions and in the previous transactions, and just like in the bank system, when somebody tries to purchase an airplane ticket from Europe and you have never purchased an airplane ticket from Europe because they know that you're in the US. So there's a red flag there. I will not recommend to do this. Just like Shawn said, the only way to change the HTS code, or there are means to do this, you could submit an application or to find what a customs agent is advising you to use for an HTS code. And you could say something like, I previously have classified my goods under this HTS. However, I believe that now my HTS code will be this and this and this. And if they come back and say you are correct, then you will have proof for when customs come back to you and say, show me proof why you have all of a sudden changed your HTS code, and you say, well, I have a ruling from Customs and Border Protection, so this ruling will be your backup. But I will not advise you to just be creative on that, unless you could create or you could prove to the CBP that maybe you changed the nature of your product. There was substantial transformation in your product that forced you or pushed you to change the HTS code.
Fantastic. So we have, I think, time for one real quick one. If we get past it, I'll try to hop in this other one. But Shawn, I recently read, not me personally, but this person, that they read in Engadget that says U.S. is delaying tariffs on electronics until December 15th. Is this true?
I believe it's only items in Section 301, List 4B is postponed to December 15th.
So there we go. That is a definitive answer on that question. So yeah, we only have a couple minutes left. So let's see if we can't try to squeeze this in. So do you guys have thoughts on whether we'll see tariffs in other regions like Mexico, and then how are CMs adjusting to the tariffs? If we can squeeze that in within a minute, I will try, but feel free, guys, to hop in whenever you want.
Very quickly, we have seen that the U.S. is using this tariff as a media to influence in some economical and political factors. So this question was specifically asked in regards to Mexico, and so we saw that Mexico, that the U.S. imposed some tariff in Mexico because they wanted them to enforce more control in the border. And so Mexico already is dealing with this, and as long my perception, and this could change at any time in Washington, my perception is that as long as the Mexican government shows to the U.S. government that they're doing everything in their hands to control the flow of people through the borders, this tariff will remain this way. However, this can change. But in regards to other countries, we have seen recent tariff in Iran, different tariff in other countries imposed because we are trying to influence in different sectors. So I'll let Shawn finish this one, and let's see.
No, I think you've covered mostly everything, Ricardo, and it's really we have customers that are highly interested in moving away from Asia, actually, and going to Mexico for reasons just because there's the NAFTA definitely that works, and it's also closer in proximity to, especially if their market is here. It's closer proximity here, lower shipping times, etc. So there are advantages to that as well. one of the things, again, when you're thinking of moving from different regions or so, certain countries, there are many countries that can produce many different goods, but certain countries have a tendency to be very good with, for example, high mix, low volume. Other countries have an advantage in low mix, high volume, et cetera. And those are really things that you need to consider as well, and being able to find the right manufacturing partner for your needs.
Fantastic. And so with that, we will wrap up our live Q&A with Shawn and Ricardo. Thank you, gentlemen. This has been really helpful, very informative. I think a lot of these questions and subjects people are very much interested in learning a lot more about. So it's very helpful to have experts like yourselves to help, break this down and give people a lot more information. So once again, thank you to both of you for coming out for this. So I also want to thank everybody for attending this and sending in those awesome questions. This is definitely helpful for us to know what you all want to learn about. So again, thanks to everybody for coming. We have a recording of this, so you can go back and listen to some of these more in-depth answers. And then we'll send that out in the next few days. And so if you didn't get your question answered, feel free to email us as well at help@dragoninnovation.com. We'll try to connect you with the right person, whether that's Ricardo or Shawn, or one of our other Dragon experts as well. And so once again, thank you everybody for coming out. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.